9. Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Chapter 3. It's March 29th, Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Ameritech Private Airstrip, Los Angeles, California. Jeff Davis met the jet at the private runway. He shook hands with several of the agents who deplaned, some he'd worked assignments with, and some newbies who were arriving to begin training. Jeff smiled. Their lives would be hell for the next year. A section leader moved forward to take charge of the newbies, and Jeff waited for his charge to disembark. When he stood at the top of the steps, Jeff looked him over. Gabriel Tanner looked a lot like his father. At only 17 years of age, he was tall, athletic, bound with muscle, and becoming a crack shot. His hair was dark brown like his father, though he was number 6 in a line of 7 children. He was the first biological child of his father. As Gabe joked many times, apparently that doesn't make him special, nor does the fact that he's the only boy. He had 5 older half-sisters, all blue-eyed blondes, and 1 blue-eyed baby sister who had his same dark hair and his heart. Gabe was needing some time away from the girls and so decided to spend the week with his father's close friend. Grinning, Gabe offered his hand to Jeff as he neared the bottom of the steps. "Agent Davis," he said, "thanks so much for making this happen." "Well, we're not in any official capacity this week, Gabe, so just call me Jeff." "Yes, sir. Got it. We're going to head back to the main house for now and drive up to the lake early in the morning." "Sounds good. I told your mom I'd have you call when you landed," Jeff added. "I already did." "You're good, Gabe." "Yeah, that's what she said." Jeff chuckled and hit him on the back of the head. Gabe had actually meant that that was what his mom said when he'd just spoken to her, but he didn't let on. "What guns did you bring?" "My Glock, .357 revolver, the NATO semi-auto, and my AR. Jeff nodded. "Well, that ought to do it." "Ammo?" "I brought a good amount." "Well, we'll get more if we need to." He nodded. "Looks like we're going to have a blast." "Literally." Gabe laughed. He'd been looking forward to this trip. Agent Jefferson Davis was one of Ameritech's top agents. The hair bleached blonde by the sun and his cheerful demeanor made Gabe think of a classic Cali surfer dude. But Jeff Davis was lethal. Labeled a sharpshooter, his skills had saved Gabe's father's life, way back before his parents married. Then Jeff had been taken and tortured by terrorists, and Gabe's father had waded through hell and high water to rescue him. It was the stuff they make movies about. And he wasn't only good with guns. All of Ameritech's agents had to be no less than a second-degree black belt in at least 2 forms of martial arts. Ameritech owner Jason Lee uses and implements his master's martial arts, which is Zendo-Ryu, which is a combination of many styles. Gabe himself was a black belt in Zendo-Ryu, since that is what his neighbor, Master John Apple, teaches, having had the same master as Mr. Lee, namely Grandmaster Eric Kino. Master Apple's son, Jacob Apple, is a second-degree black belt, and Gabe had a lot of respect for the Marine Raider. Jeff and Gabe hefted luggage and gun bags and headed to the Davis home near Huntington Beach. It wasn't fancy like the Kino estate or big like the home Gabe lived in down in Middle Georgia, but it was nice, and it had a pool, and it was only about 2 miles from the beach. The 4-bedroom home was a slate blue with clean white trim. As soon as they drove up, the boys came running out to greet them. "Hey, Gabe," Daniel said brightly. "Hey, big guy," Gabe returned. "Anybody ever tell you look a lot like your dad?" "Ha, yeah, like everyone." "How old are you now, like 14? "I wish. I'm 12, and he motioned to younger brother Jeremy, and he's 11, but I know you know that." Gabe laughed. "Aren't you just so smart?" He reached out and mussed Jeremy's hair. "Hey, Jerm, good to see you." The Shire boy smiled up at Gabe. "Hi." "Okay, guys, let's get inside," Jeff started. "We got packing to do, dinner to make, and your mom to kiss." They went inside and ushered Gabe to a bedroom. Feeling a little jet-lagged, Gabe sat on the bed. He'd been up at the crack of dawn, Georgia time, gone shooting, went to school, headed straight to Atlanta, caught a 4-hour flight, and driven an hour to the Davis home. It was almost 10 back home, and Gabe would already be asleep because the Tanner family did that early to bed, early to rise thing. And here it was, almost 7, and there were things that needed to be done. He went in the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face and headed downstairs. The aromas drifting through the house made Gabe's mouth water. The boys were in the living room playing the ever-popular Call of Duty. There were packed bags stacked up next to the front door, so apparently the boys were already packed for their trip to the lake house. Mrs. Davis was in the kitchen, singing softly as she cooked. That made him smile because his own mother did that. Of course, his own mother was Lizzie Tanner, the Grammy-winning singer with, as his father put it, the voice of an angel. Gabe moved toward the open kitchen. "Hey, Mrs. Davis." The pretty lady turned, a big smile on her face. "Gabriel, there you are." She came running out of the kitchen and threw her arms around him. "Wow, you must have grown 6 inches since last year. You look like a grown man." Gabe blushed. "Well, not 6 inches, but about 3. Nice to see you, Mrs. Davis." "Mickey. Remember I said you call me Mickey." "I'll try." She laughed, and the sound was beautiful. He blinked. This lady had to be in her late 30s, early 40s maybe, but she was a real looker. He cleared his throat. Is there anything I can do to help?" "Yeah," Jeff said as he came in from the garage. "You can grab that large cooler and bring it in." Gabe did as told and then spent the next 30 minutes filling 2 giant coolers with all kinds of supplies, loading the back of a Ford F-150 Super Crew and putting on the tonneau cover. When he finished, he sat at the kitchen island watching Jeff and Mrs. Davis cook dinner like their movements had been choreographed. More than cooking, they were playing touchy-feely as they moved around. Every time they passed each other, Jeff would stroke his wife's arm, or she would put her hand on his face and lean up for a kiss. They reminded him of his parents, and it was cool to watch. They were laughing and singing a few words to the song, playing on a cell phone. They danced a few steps. They were in complete harmony. Jeff sipped a beer and came up behind his wife as she washed her hands at the sink and nuzzled on her neck. And she shooed him away, nodding at Gabe. Jeff suddenly turned and pulled another beer from the fridge, opened it, and set it in front of Gabe. Gabe looked up. "Really?" Jeff shrugged. "Well, just this once. You'll be a man soon enough. Have you ever had a beer?" Uh, Jeff laughed. "Okay, I won't make you confess, but I can figure you have." "How's that?" Gabe asked as he took a long pull from the bottle. "Well, you live in the sticks. Friday night, after the game, small town Georgia, out by the lake, cute girl by your side. It makes for a classic country song, and there's always beer in a country song." Gabe laughed. "I guess you got us pegged." "Well, I'm originally from the South. My mom didn't name me Jefferson Davis for nothing." "Dinner's ready," Mickey announced. Everyone quickly helped bring the meal to the table. Spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, salad, and the promise of ice cream if plates were cleaned. They sat at the table. Everyone took hands just like they did at Gabe's home. Tonight he held Mrs. Davis's hand and Jeremy's hand, and Jeff offered a blessing on the food and asked for protection for his family and loved ones again, like his own father usually did. It gave Gabe a warm feeling in his gut. These things they did, the small things, like pray for their families and kiss their wives, even just be in a good mood when they must be tired. These men are what he aspires to be. Their strength is comforting. Their belief in God and their willingness to show it and not be ashamed, it is inspiring. Everyone had been served, the food tasted, and compliments given when Jeff's cell phone went off. The mood immediately changed. Mrs. Davis, Mickey, bit down on her lower lip. The boys quieted and looked up toward their father, their eyes hopeful. Jeff, lips pressed tightly together, glanced apologetically at his wife before he picked up the phone. "What you got, Jason?" "Sorry, Jeff, I know it's your vacation, but you said when it was time for extracting Claire Martin and her kids from her situation that you wanted to be in on it. We have an opportunity, and I think it's now or never. I'm just giving you the opportunity. I can send someone else." Jeff sighed. "No, I promised her and the kids that I would be there. I can't let them down." "I'll expect you for the briefing then in 2 hours." "I'll be there." He ended the call and looked at his wife. She smiled bravely. "No worries, Jeff. We can handle it, can't we, boys?" she asked brightly. Jeff forced a smile. Gabe looked back and forth between them. He hadn't even told her yet what was going on, and she already showed her support. I have to leave to take care of a woman and her 2 kids who are being held against their will by her husband. I'll be gone 24 hours, tops. Mickey nodded. You guys can go ahead and drive out to the lake house, and I'll join you by this time tomorrow. Aw, Dad, Daniel complained. I know it's hard, son, but think of this. What if you boys and your mom were being held somewhere and some bad men wouldn't even let you go outside or to school or to the store or anywhere? There is nothing to do. You can't even use your phone or computer. You're a prisoner. Not only that, but these same bad guys take your mom and beat her up whenever they want. Jeremy hung his head and sniffed back tears. Are you going to go help them get away? Yes, that is exactly what I'm going to do, and I need you guys to help your mom while I'm gone, and it's only going to be for one day, okay? Yes, sir, the boys said in unison. Gabe looked over at Mickey. Her face was pale, and it looked like she might pass out. He remembered the story of how Jeff and Mickey met. She'd been kidnapped and held against her will in a cabin that was actually up near the lake house they were headed to. Jeff had been on vacation then, too. Agent Davis, Gabe began, addressing him formally since he felt the shift in the atmosphere. I'll help take care of your family while you're gone. I'll do whatever Mrs. Davis needs me to do. Jeff took a huge bite of garlic bread, chewed, and nodded. Thank you, Gabe. I gotta go. He held his hand out to his wife. Mickey, a word, please. He led her down a hallway for some privacy, pulled her close, tilted her face up, and kissed her. I love you, sweetheart, he murmured. And I love you, she said. Come back to me, please. Always. Don't be afraid to ask Gabe to do anything you need. He's a good kid, and he's strong, and he can shoot almost as well as I can. No one can do anything as well as you can. Jeff smiled. I'll try to live up to that. You take the truck since it's already loaded. Don't forget to stop and get ice on the way out. I'll take your car. I really need to get on the road. He kissed her one more time, then walked out to tell his boys goodbye. He always took a few minutes to relieve their fears, to admonish them, and to let them know how much he loved them, since any mission could end with his death. Lastly, he shook Gabe's hand. 24 hours, he said. You got this? Yes, sir, I got it. Make sure you come back in one piece. Jeff smiled. If not, I'll just call your dad. Gabe smiled and nodded. He watched Agent Davis gather his weapons, check them, bag them, along with the Kevlar vest. The man had to be tired, he had to be hungry, and by the time Gabe saw him again tomorrow would probably be triple what he was now. His father always said Jeff Davis is one of the good guys, like Ricky Keno and Mark and Joey Adams and John Apple and, of course, Grandmaster Keno. One day, Gabe hoped to join that list. New scene. It's March 30th, Saturday afternoon, at the Davis Lake House, Northern California. They'd left the house in the wee hours of the morning, and it was just afternoon by the time they pulled up to the lake house in the Plumas National Forest in Northern California. Mickey stood outside the house and smiled. It looked much differently now than it did the first time she'd seen it. They'd put a lot of work into it. It now had a large front porch, when before it had no porch at all. It used to be a dirty yellow color, and now it was a crisp white with blue trim, sort of a reverse of their main house. It now had landscaping and a full deck and a boat dock and boat out back. The kitchen and bathrooms had been completely renovated. Mickey loved it here, mostly because it was where she'd met her husband. Her husband, the hero. Her husband, who'd rescued her from certain death more than once, had rescued countless others, and was currently doing the same thing for a woman and her 2 kids. Her husband, whom she loved more than life, and for whom she thanked God every single day. Mickey watched as, true to his word, Gabriel Tanner carried in the large coolers and then started on their luggage. Her boys also helped. The boys were full of energy, having slept most of the way. Gabe, she could tell, was tired, but he didn't complain. He tried to stay awake to talk to her as she drove. He'd offered to do some of the driving, and she let him while she got a little bit of rest. Now he was hard at work getting things unpacked, setting up the house, checking out the dock and the boat and the ATVs. She'd come in and set up the kitchen and began making lunch for the hungry guys. If Gabe was anything like her boys, he was always hungry. They ate lunch outside on the deck in the bright sunshine. Meat and cheese sandwiches, tortilla chips and salsa, fruit, and large chocolate chip cookies. Encouraged by Mickey, Gabe scarfed down 3 sandwiches. He pushed back from the glass table and rested his chin on his chest. He startled when 30 minutes later Mickey laid her hand on his forehead. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to startle you. It's just that it's pretty hot out here in the sun. Why don't you go inside and take a little nap? He jumped up. I am so sorry. I can't believe I fell asleep. He glanced around. Is everything okay? She smiled sweetly. Yes, everything is fine. You just look like you're burning up. I'm okay. What can I do for you? Anything? Actually, I was going to try to write a little bit, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to convince you to go in and take a nap. So instead, would you mind keeping the boys occupied outside? No, I don't mind a bit, and I don't need a nap because apparently I've already taken one. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. I'll take the boys for a trip around the lake in the boat. Oh, that would be nice. Where are the life preservers? Yes, ma'am. He gathered the guys who were very willing to go out on the boat. She watched them load up the bow rider and pull away. Mickey went into her room and sat on her bed, her laptop across her knees. The words spilled out for a couple of hours. It was difficult, though, and as she read over the pages she'd just written, she highlighted them all and hit delete. It was just too hard to concentrate, not knowing how Jeff's mission was going. Sometimes he would text and let her know everything was okay. He hadn't so far. She could call Jason, but if he had every agent's worried wife calling him for status updates all the time, he'd never get anything done. She knew his current mission was tricky. The home was in a secluded area, surrounded by high walls and secured fencing. The husband was a filthy rich drug lord who had a lot of hired gunmen. Ameritech and the police were working in tandem, and Jeff's mission was solely the safety of the wife and 2 children. It was because of the wife's cleverness in getting a message out of the compound that the police had a case at all. And when Jeff had met with the woman at an amusement park with her 2 young children in tow, that was when he'd made the promise. Feeling antsy and nervous, she did what she knew she needed to do. She dropped to her knees and prayed. She prayed for Jeff's safety. She gave thanks for their family. She prayed for the safety of the woman and her children. She prayed for a very long time, and then, finally, she got the feeling that she wanted. It was a feeling she'd felt before. It was as if God just reached inside her and took away all the anxiety. A sweet feeling of peace came over her, and she knew Jeff would be okay. After attempting to write again for a while, she gave up and went out back. The boys were just pulling up to the dock. They jumped off the boat and greeted her, then immediately told her how hungry they were. She glanced at her phone to check the time. I'm not going to start dinner for at least another hour, but you guys go inside and grab what you want. She called out a list of everything that they could have as they ran inside. Gabe finished securing the boat. I'll go supervise. She nodded. Thanks, hon. Jeff should be home in less than 2 hours if he really does make it back in his allotted 24-hour time frame. I'm going to start dinner in about an hour, and I was thinking of taking a walk to clear my head a bit. Gabe frowned. Alone? She smiled at him. Oh, that was very much like my husband. The boys and I, we can come along if you'd like. I'd really just like to be alone. She held up her phone. I'll call you if I need you. He sighed. Okay. I did promise the guys we'd do some fishing. That would be great. Thanks so much, Gabe. You've been a lifesaver. Mickey turned left and headed out toward the lake. Her thought was to walk along the shore of the lake, and she did that for some time until she came to a place where the shore turned into large rocks, so she went to higher ground to find a way around the rocks. She had to climb quite a ways up away from the lake. The woods were pretty and quiet and peaceful. Mickey called Gabe to make sure she could still get through. Yes, ma'am, he said immediately. She laughed. Everything's okay. I'm just making sure I have reception. Loud and clear, Gabe said. Okay, you guys have fun fishing. Yes, ma'am. Hold on a second. I'm putting you on speaker. Hey, Mom, Daniel yelled. Jeremy already caught a fish, but I'm going to catch a bigger one any time now. No, you're not, Jeremy yelled. Always be happy for someone in your family accomplishing something, Mickey admonished. Did you hear that, guys? Gabe added. Mickey heard some grumbling. See you guys in a little while. Bye, Mom, they yelled. She hit the end button and slid her phone into her hip pocket. It was only a few more steps along the top of the ridge when her feet went out from under her. She didn't fall far, only about the length of her body, but she did smack the side of her head on one of the rocks. Sitting up shakily, she put her hand to her temple. Thank goodness there was no blood. Carefully, she made her way back up to the top of the hill and moved a little farther into the woods so she wouldn't be so close to the edge. Deciding she'd better not press her luck, she turned and started home, this time staying away from the edge. Mickey knew she'd been walking at least as long as she had on her way out, but the house was nowhere in sight. She took out her phone. She'd been gone over an hour. She was tired and sweaty, and the strange thing was, she didn't even see the lake anymore. Standing still, she then spun in a slow circle, a sick feeling coming over her. Everything looked the same. It all seemed so confusing. Sighing, she admitted to herself that she was good and lost. Taking out her phone again, she called Gabriel. Yes, ma'am, are you okay? His voice was filled with concern. Hey, Gabe, yes, I'm okay. Will you do me a favor? Please get the boys inside and make them some of those frozen hamburgers for dinner, and don't anyone go back out until I get home. Gabe's brow wrinkled. Is something wrong? Do you need me to come get you? Well, that would be great if I knew where I was, but I don't want you to leave the boys. I'm going to call Jeff. I'll be okay. Just promise me you'll take care of the boys. Well, yes, of course. Don't worry about them. Thanks, Gabe. She ended the call and immediately called her husband and was relieved when he picked up on the first ring. Hey, hun. I was just about to call you. I'm about 30 minutes out. Sorry I didn't get to call you earlier. I've been on the phone for hours, tying up loose ends and being interviewed by the cops. You know how it goes. Jeff, thank goodness you're okay. I'm fine, a little nicked up, but I'll make it. Jeff? Mickey? What's wrong? I'm not sure. His heart started pounding. What do you mean? Tell me what's going on. I think I'm lost. Lost? Yes, I went for a walk and I can't find my way back to the house. Where are the boys? They're at the house with Gabe. I just spoke to them. He's going to feed them dinner. He sighed. He was bone tired, bleeding in at least 3 places. He'd refused going to the hospital because that would mean not making it back to his family in the 24 hours that he'd promised. He drew a deep breath and forced his mind into work mode. Okay, hun, which way did you go when you left the house? To the, I think to the left. You think? She sounded confused and something wasn't right. I'm pretty sure. Did you go past the shooting range? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did that. He was silent a second. Mickey, are you wearing the cross I gave you a few years ago? She laughed. Yes, I always wear it. Are you suggesting I ask God for directions? He chuckled. It couldn't hurt. Well, I hate to bother him with something as stupid as me getting myself lost. Well, he's always there for you, no matter how big or small the problem. But that's not really why I asked you about the cross. Well, then, why would you ask me about the necklace I'm wearing out of the blue when I tell you the problem is I'm lost? He was silent a second too long. Jeff Davis, is there a GPS in my necklace? Don't be mad, but yes, there is. I'm not mad, but why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you now. Okay, fine. I don't feel well enough to argue right now anyway. Well, why don't you feel well? I don't know. Everything seems so peculiar, I guess. Honey, have you been drinking? No. Why? Because you don't seem yourself. I'm not myself. Hey, I think I see something. What do you see? It looks like a house, I guess, or a small cabin. Maybe I'll go knock on the door and... Mickey, stop. Stop right where you are. She stopped. Okay, but why? Do you trust me, sweetheart? Yes, of course. Well, do not go up to that cabin. Do not leave the cover of the tree line. I have to get you traced. Do you see a tree near you? Yes, I'm standing next to a tree. Good. I want you to sit down and put your back against the tree. Okay. Sweetheart, I'm going to put you on hold a minute. Do not hang up and do not move. Okay. Call Ameritech back office, he said. Hey, Jeff, this is Paige. Paige, can you get a readout on my wife's GPS? He waited the few seconds it took her. Yes, sir. She's about a mile and a half northwest of your lake house. Okay, we have a situation. She's lost in the woods, but there's something else wrong. She's like really out of it. Let me know if she starts to move at all. Got it. You want me to start a search? Not yet. I'm almost there. You're 20 minutes away. Well, a chopper would take a lot longer than that. The sun is going down. Yes, I know. I got to switch back over to her. Just let me know if she moves. He switched over. Mickey, you still there? Ow! Oh, ow! What's happening? There are ants on the tree. Okay, move to another place, but stay still after you move. I'm 20 minutes out. I'm coming to you. Stay still. It's getting dark. I know, sweetie. I won't be too much longer. I think I see a light in that cabin. I don't understand why you don't want me to. Do not go there. It's the cabin. The one where they held you. The one where they held me. Where who held me? Honey, did you take some pills? Not that I can remember. Think hard. I don't think so. Hey, Jeff? Yes? If that's the cabin, then if I put my back to it and walk straight in the other direction, then that should lead me back to our house, right? No, because it's not a straight shot. I'm going to give it a try. Do not disobey me, Mickey. I mean it. You stay still. I don't want you walking in the dark. Stay still. Well, I don't think I have a choice anyway. Why? Because I stood up and now I'm really dizzy. Well, sit back down, hon. I'm almost there. Silence. Mickey? Mickey. He punched over. Paige? Yep, I'm still here. Mickey is still in the same spot, and you must be flying because you are now just over 5 minutes out. Call for a chopper from the medical center in Susanville. I think Mick's going to need medical attention. She stopped responding to me. Roger that. He punched over. Call Gabe, he said. Hey, I was about to call you. Mrs. Davis is lost somewhere. I know. Grab a flashlight and get the four-wheeler running. Be there in a few minutes. Tell the boys they can play video games and do not leave the house. You're coming with me. Yes, sir. Jeff flew the last few miles. He came to a screeching halt, jumped from his truck, ran in the house, pointed at his sons. Do not leave that sofa. He ran out the back door, and Gabe was just starting the ATV. You're driving, he yelled over the loud engine. Gabe nodded. Paige, still there? Yes, sir. Head north and slightly west. He gave the directions to Gabe. The lights from the four-wheeler were weak, and Jeff shone the flashlight to help. Why are you turning? You need to go straight, Paige warned. I have to go around trees. Okay, we're back on the correct trajectory. Turn slightly left. Good. Go another 200 yards. Good. Slow down. You should be coming up on her in about... I see her. He sprang from the vehicle. Mickey lay crumpled at the base of a tree, her phone still in her hand. Gabe jumped out to help in any way possible. They gently turned her over, and she moaned. Jeff brushed his hand over her face and her head, then her body, looking for injuries, snake bite, anything. The only thing he found was a bump on the side of her head. Mickey, he said softly, hey, baby, can you talk to me? She opened her eyes. Jeff, I missed you. He smiled. Yep, I missed you too. Can you tell me what happened? I got lost. Anything else? I fell on some rocks, but I didn't fall very far, just a few feet. And you hit your head? How did you know? He gave a soft laugh. Sweetie, we're going to get you back to the house. Here, put your arms around my neck. He gave a small grunt as he lifted her, and Gabe helped Jeff back into the vehicle and jumped back behind the wheel and took off. At the house, Jeff carried Mickey in and laid her on the sofa. The boys were quiet, doing what they could to help by grabbing a towel and the first aid kit. Breathing hard, Jeff stood back a minute to get his bearings. That was when Gabe pulled his eyes away from Mrs. Davis and looked Jeff over. He wore, sorry, he wore a white t-shirt with blood spattered over it in several places, the majority of blood at his shoulder. His thigh was wrapped with a dark-colored towel and was being held there with duct tape. There was a large black spot on the towel, which probably was also blood. You just couldn't tell because the towel was a dark color. Agent Davis, sit down, Gabe ordered. Jeff didn't argue. He nodded and slumped down into a chair. There's a chopper on the way for Mickey. Yes, sir, I'll take care of it, and I hope there's room on that chopper for you. Jeff nodded and looked down at his thigh, then back up. Danny, can you get me some water? The boy jumped to do his bidding. Gabe wasn't quite sure what to do, so he called his father. Hey, son, how's it going? Gabe filled his father in on what was happening. Son, I have to call Jason. Your mom wants to talk to you. Gabe, you need to get Jeff to lay down on the floor and then elevate his leg. Put some cushions under it. Gabe did what his mother said. Now check on Mickey. Is she awake? Sort of. She doesn't seem to know what's going on. Get some ice and a towel and have one of the boys hold it against the lump on her head. Your dad says the chopper ETA is 15 minutes. Do not give Jeff any more water. He's thirsty because he's lost a lot of blood, but don't let him drink. Yes, ma'am. You're doing fine, Gabe. Talk to Jeff and see if he responds. Hey, Agent Davis, Gabe said, placing his hand on his forehead. How you doing? I'm okay. How's Mickey? Tell him she's fine. His mother said she has a concussion. She'll be okay. Gabe repeated the message, and Jeff nodded and closed his eyes. The sound of chopper blades slicing the air had Gabe offering a prayer of thanks. He ran outside, turned on the truck lights, and waved his arms. They would have to land in the street because there was no other place. Gabe stood back and watched the activity around him. All he could do was comfort the boys and let them know their parents were going to be just fine. He'd been informed that Jason was sending another chopper to pick them up. He wasn't sure where they were taking them. The boys, feeling certain that their mom and dad were okay, got excited about riding in a helicopter. Gabe watched the paramedics work on Jeff. They cut away the duct tape, unwrapped the blood-soaked towel, and cut open the leg of his pants to show an angry wound. It wasn't a bullet wound, Gabe could tell. It looked more like a knife wound, which told Gabe that Jeff had been in hand-to-hand combat. Did he not realize how bad the wound was? Why would he drive all the way without first getting some medical attention? And while he pondered those thoughts, they started an IV and began working on Jeff's shoulder. Again, they cut away the material. And this was a bullet. There were also nicks and cuts all over his arms and legs and one on his cheek. Gabe shook his head. His own father had come home looking similarly tattered and torn a few times. What these men went through on a regular basis, suffering in silence, putting other people's lives ahead of their own, it was moving, and Gabe's heart felt such admiration and gratitude that such men existed, and one of them was his own father. He moved his attention to the other paramedic who was speaking softly to Mrs. Davis and shining a light in her eyes. He felt guilty that she'd been hurt and lost. He should have known better than to allow her to go off alone, and he was sure he'd be reprimanded for that. He was a kid, and she was an adult, but he still should have asked her to not go or let him go with her. He'd known instinctively that there was danger, hadn't he? He'd immediately questioned her going alone. She'd even said he sounded like her husband, a great compliment. He should have been stronger. When you know something isn't right, you take action. Lesson learned. His phone buzzed and he put it to his ear. Hey, Dad. Yes, they're okay. I think she's okay. They're working on him now. I see a pretty big knife wound on his thigh and a bullet wound in his shoulder. On the chopper, Jason is sending there are a couple of agents. They're going to pack up the lake house and drive Jeff's vehicles back to his home. You and the boys pack your stuff. The chopper's taking you to stay with the Kinos. Gabe smiled at that information. Sorry, kiddo, but it looks like your little vacation is over before it got started. Gabe nodded. No big deal, Dad. I'm just glad they're going to be okay. So, I was wondering, do you know how it all went down? I mean, the case Agent Davis was working on. Have you been briefed? Did the good guys win? Keegan Tanner smiled. He was so proud of his son, who was constantly thinking, constantly reasoning, absorbing information like a sponge. I've been briefed. The good guys won, but not without a pretty major battle and suffering a loss. Bad guys lost several men. Good guys lost one, a vice cop. Jeff and Agent Hawk had to fight through a dozen bad guys to get the family out. So they had to kill people. Keegan was silent a moment and finally took a deep breath. Yes, son, they did. It's a hard thing, and it changes you, but it's something that has to be done sometimes in order to protect the innocence of the world. We're warriors. That's what we do. I'm just asking because, it didn't seem to affect him. I mean, he just got back from killing a bunch of people, and all he could think of was finding Mrs. Davis and seeing his kids. Other than being banged up, it didn't seem to affect him. It did. When his father didn't say anything else, Gabe realized his father was thinking of his own demons. His father was actually known as a killer. Sometimes the other agents joked about it, but that was only a defense mechanism, Gabe knew. They joked about things like that to ease the pressure. Once his father had killed 23 men in a few hours' time when he rescued Jeff from terrorists. He'd shot some of them, broken the necks of some, and slit the throats of some, and he'd been bound and determined to save Jeff Davis. And he'd been demonized in front of the whole world and called in front of a congressional hearing. Gabe had heard the stories many times and seen news clips and videos about it. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to understand. I know you're trying to understand, son. Don't ever apologize for that. I hope you never have to fully understand. However, I see the trajectory your life seems to be taking, so yeah, let's try to learn and understand before it happens. For now, though, we need to put this discussion on hold. Go get those boys packed up. The chopper will be there soon. Yes, sir. And son, I'm proud of you. Gabe smiled. Back at you, Dad. Gabe moved to Jeff's side where Daniel and Jeremy stood, and Jeff was alert and speaking to them. And your mom and I should be back in just a few days. Don't give Gabe any trouble, okay? No, sir, we won't, Daniel said. Gabe placed his arms around the shoulders of each kid. Don't worry, Agent Davis. Jason is sending a chopper to take us down to the Keno's house. All right, the boys cried. Jeff laughed. And just like that, everything is okay. He closed his eyes and scrunched his face. Gabe watched him. He was obviously in pain. Instinctively, he put a hand on his shoulder. Some agents are going to pack up here and drive your cars down to your house. Don't worry about a thing. I won't let the boys out of my sight. Thanks, Gabe. You're a good kid. He looked over at the medic, who was taking his blood pressure again. How's my wife? I'm good, honey, Mickey herself answered. They think I have a concussion and want me to stay at the hospital for observation. I'm so sorry, Jeff. We'll talk about that later. Right now, you just get better. He gave a soft grunt and closed his eyes again. Agent Davis, you're in pain? Gabe asked. Nah, this isn't pain. I'm just a little uncomfortable. Remind me one day to tell you about real pain. I will remind you. I'm sorry, Agent Davis, that I didn't go with Mrs. Davis on her walk or didn't demand that she not go. It's okay. She can be pretty obstinate when she has her mind set on something. No, sir, that's not good enough reason for me failing to protect her. I promised you I would. I should have been stronger, even if it means I made her mad at me. It won't happen again. Well, you are more like your dad than I thought, but you gotta lighten up a little, Gabe. Besides, Mick's old enough to be your mother, and don't you tell her I said that. Would you boss your own mother around? Oh, in a heartbeat, if I thought she was in danger. Jeff chuckled. Again, you are your father. He gave a slight moan and closed his eyes. Right now, I can't really focus. So let's save this for another day. Yes, sir. The EMTs ushered Gabe and the kids back as they prepared to move the gurneys. Come on, guys, Gabe said softly. Let's go get ready. And that is the end of chapter 3.